Okay, so we already talked about the 7 types of two-phase flow regimes, starting from the bubbly regimes that is close to a liquid flow, up until the spray regime that is close to the vapor flow. So as mentioned before, today we will talk about the regimes map, how to classify the operation windows of each regimes, and more importantly, the pressure drop calculations for this multi-phase flow. But to give you a little bit of illustrations about the example of the applications of this multi-phase flow, I will give some overview first. This is the example of the multi-phase flow problem in application. As mentioned on Tuesday, we actually want to avoid this multi-phase flow as much as possible because it's not stable. It requires a large pressure drops and so on. But it still happen. So some of the typical problem that happens in industry is like a slug formation, which will be shown in the next slide about the video, the example. So slug means you have like a separate liquid plugging the pipeline. So it's like, hold on a minute. So I think slug is like a big bubble of liquid that is separated at the bottom, so it could plug the pipeline and cause a very high pressure drop. And then hydrate, what is a hydrate? So hydrate, again, this is multi-phase flow, so it's almost like a three-phase flow problem now, because we have a liquid, we have a gas, but actually hydrate is like a solid. So it's actually a solid consisting of methane, CH4, with a certain percent of water. So that's like a crystal. So it's like a crystal that also could cause a problem in a pipeline, in a multi-phase flow pipeline. So when we have a methane natural gas flow, for example, working in a very small temperature, and then we have some impurities of water that could form a hydrate that cannot be solved in a conventional standardized fluid mechanics calculation because it's a multi-phase flow now. And of course, we have a wax. It's a waxy content from a heavy hydrocarbon. So now it's not in a gas flow, but it's actually in the crude oil flow. For example, when you produce crude oil from well and you want to send it to the refinery, for example, and you have some waxy content. Wax is a heavy hydrocarbon. Usually it's higher than C30 H something. Okay, so heavy hydrocarbon that tends to be viscous and also could cause a problem in the pipeline. So yeah, we have a lot of problem with the multi-phase flow. That's why it's actually important for you to have some perspective about the application of this multi-phase flow. The calculation will not be explained in detail for bachelor degree or undergraduate as in any university in the world, I think, because it's actually will be studied later if you really want to be specialized in this kind of application in master degree or even in the doctoral degree. And then another type is a pigging, which I will show you the video next. Okay. This is to clean the pipeline. So pigging is to clean the pipeline. This is to clean the pipeline because of the deposit at the bottom of the pipeline. So yeah, this is like the typical example. We have some oil or gas offshore production, and then we have the horizontal pipe, and of course, because this is a well, of course there will be some vertical tubing to produce the oil and gas. And then it will be sent to a platform, for example, with a certain depth. Okay, with a certain depth, it's just example. So this is the kind of example that we will get some multi-phase flow problem, because as you probably aware, when we produce oil, there will be associated gas coming from the well. So that will be oil plus associated gas. So that means it must be a multi-phase flow. Okay, so it must be a multi-phase flow. So within this pipeline, there will be some slugging, there will be some turbulence that will happen if the pipe is not sized properly. So yeah, let me go to the video to give you some visual illustrations. Let me know if the sound is heard, okay? Because the sound is actually coming from the video directly. Can you hear the sound of the video?
Can you play it again, sir?
So it's actually full of audio, but I'm not sure you can hear the audio. If not, then I have to describe it to you. But just let me know. Can you hear the video? The audio?
It's really small, sir.
Okay. Okay. So let me just describe it to you manually. Okay. So yeah, it's just the illustration of the system that I mentioned to you in almost every offshore production of oil and gas. You can imagine that this is the wellhead production. So to the bottom, that will be like the tubing to get into the actual reservoir of the oil and gas. And every time we produce oil, there must be some associated gas that is mixed with the oil. So it must be a multi-phase flow. Okay, and then you can imagine once it reach the wellhead, it must be sent to the well platform, for example. So this is the platform, offshore platform, for example, could be kilometers. Okay, so it could be kilometers. So it has to be sent, and then there will be some vertical pipeline, as you can see over here, when the fleet will be sent directly to the platform. Okay, and again, this is a very common example of multi-phase flow problem. We can see the video now. Okay, see, this is called a riser. Okay, this is called a riser because, well, the pipeline suddenly rise. Okay, suddenly rise, become a vertical, and that's where the most problem happens. Okay, so you can see over here, that's what we call as a slug. That's what we really want to avoid. Okay, because a small bubble of liquid, which is heavier than gas, tends to concentrate at the bottom of the pipeline because of the higher density. The problem is sometimes when we have a very strict and long riser, the gas will be easier to go upward than the liquid. And the problem now, the liquid starts to coalesce, starts to merge into a bigger bubble, into a bigger slug. Okay, so this is the example of the slug. So that's why it's unstable. You can see that every time the bubble comes from the well, but not all of them send to the top of the riser. It starts to accumulate at the bottom of the pipeline. Okay.
Excuse me, sir. I'm sorry to cut,
Yep.
but I believe you're still showing us the slide.
Okay. Hold on. Okay, hold on. What's the problem? Okay, now I just realized that I don't have option to share the video for whatever reason. Let me think. Okay, I think I know the solution. Hold on a second. I'm just going straight to the YouTube. Okay, hold on. Okay, can you hear the voice now from the video?
Yes, sir, but it's really small and we can't see the video.
Perhaps try to share the whole desktop, sir.
Well, I already did that, but actually I think the video player doesn't sync with those share screen, so that's what happens earlier.
I see.
Okay, hold on. Okay. Can I share it now? Okay, can you see the video now?
Yes,
Can you
sir.
see?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay, so I open it directly from YouTube, and hopefully now let me check. Okay, let me include computer sound. Okay, now the sound should be heard. Let me know.
In all production
Can you hear the
systems
sound?
and can cause costly production upsets. There
Yes, we can, sir.
are slug types.
Okay.
Terrain slugs occur at the base of a riser.
Okay, so let me go back earlier. So again, this is the example of the offshore production of oil and gas. And as I mentioned to you earlier, coming into the wellhead, it must be a mixed liquid and gas because of the associated gas coming from the oil. But it has to be sent to the platform over here, which could be kilometers from the well. Okay, so it will involve some vertical tubing and then involve some horizontal pipeline at the bottom of the seabed, and then it will involve some riser. So as you see over here, the red circle, that's the starting point of the riser, where the pipeline start to rise vertically, and that's where slugging most of the time happens. Okay.
And can cause costly production upsets. There are several different slug types. Terrain slugs occur at the base of a riser or steep incline where liquids build up and they can't be lifted.
Okay, so the video explained it shortly that the liquid build up at the bottom of the riser. That's why it's called terrain slug, because it's happening because of the geometry of the pipeline. Okay, gas is lighter than a liquid. Of course, it will be easier for gas to goes upward. Okay, no problem at all for the gas. But liquid, it's heavier, so it will requires a bigger force for liquid to goes upward. Okay, and when it starts to accumulate at the bottom, now it forms, instead of a small bubble, it forms a bigger slug. So at the left part of the screen, if it's still a small, we can't really call it a slug. But when it start to combine, merge into one big liquid, that's when it start to call a slug. Okay, and the problem is you can see that it's not a steady state operation. So you can imagine if the oil production from the well, let's say just for a number, 10 cubic meter per second. Okay, 10 cubic meter per second from the well. Actually, the platform will not receive those 10 cubic meter per second of oil at all time. Why? Because it's stuck at the bottom of the riser. Okay, it will be stuck until it completely plug the pipeline, and there will be some very big force from the well that will push all of this plug all together into the platform.
Riser or
Okay,
steep
so
incline
let's imagine.
where liquids build up and they can't be lifted.
Okay.
Turn up.
So once it reaches to the platform, this is the first equipment that usually will happen, a flash separator, if you remember from the thermodynamic, to separate the gas, vapor, and the liquid oil. Okay, so what you can imagine now is when the oil stuck in the bottom of the riser, most of the time the separator now will not receive oil, it just receive gas, okay, even though the oil is actually producing from the well, until a very sudden force, the big wave, okay, the big wave that we talked in the presentation before, the big wave coming in, and at a very short period it received the big wave of the slug into the system, and it's really unstable. It caused a lot of operation to the engineers, to the operators that works in the oil and gas industry. Okay, that's why nowadays I think most of the problem in fluid mechanics in oil and gas industry is for a multi-phase pipeline system.
Slugs
That's
occur
why
when
it
there's an
actually
increasing
requires
rate
a lot
through the
of
system,
computational
which sweeps accumulated liquids to a separator or slug catcher. Hydrodynamic slugs are caused by shear at the gas-liquid interface between the different movements of gas and liquid.
Hydrodynamic slug, this is when we talk about the regime earlier. Maybe it's not because of the riser, but because of the ratio between the gas and the liquid itself. At certain ratio, the gas will be stratified at the top and the liquid will be concentrated at the bottom, and it goes at a different velocity. Gas will be faster, liquid will be slower, and it starts to build up. Okay. Of course, you can imagine once the liquid start to deposit at the bottom of the pipeline, the actual area that can be used to transfer the flow becomes smaller. Okay, so let's say it's a 10-inch diameter pipeline, but the bottom 20% of the pipeline is filled with the slow liquid or almost unmoved liquid. Now actually you just have 80% of the pipeline that can be used. That means now we have a faster velocity, a bigger pressure drop. Okay, so if you start to imagine why we have a bigger pressure drop for a two-phase flow, that's some of the combination that could happen. Because now we start to form a slug, now we start to have a wave, now we start to have a smaller actual pipeline that can be filled by a fluid, a lot of different variations. Okay.
Pigging slugs are caused by the accumulation of liquids swept through the pipeline ahead of the pig.
So this is what is called by pigging. The yellow part, that's called a pig. Okay, I don't know why they call it that way, but it's really called a pig. So every once in a while, let's say annually, once a year or twice a year, or maybe 2 years, every 2 years, the pressure drop becomes to accumulated. Okay, the pressure drops start to accumulate. Why? Because it's unavoidable to have some accumulation at the bottom of the pipeline. So when that starts to happen, the company will start to arrange the maintenance, the cleaning of the pipeline. So it will be sent, the pig will be sent from the wellhead to the platform. It will be launched. Okay, so we will have something called as a pig launcher and pig receiver. Pig launcher means it will launch the pig that is used to clean up the pipeline. Okay, to clean up.
Knowing when these are likely to occur and how to mitigate against.
So it's good for the pipeline, but you can now imagine. Let's say I said it once a year we perform a pigging. That means all the liquid that is accumulated at the bottom of the pipeline for 1 year, now it will be sent to the platform, and we will have a big wave coming into the platform because of the cleaning of those all accumulated liquid. Okay, it's good for the pipeline, but the operators, the engineers has to be ready to receive it at the platform. Otherwise, it will be filled. Okay, you can imagine if the separator doesn't enough, then you literally have a flooding into the platform because of those big wave of the accumulated liquid.
Against them are critical considerations for a safe operation. How can slugging be predicted? The PipeSim simulator identifies slugging conditions and provides estimates of slug size. But individual slugs can be tracked in detail using transient simulation with the Olga simulator, so slug volumes and dumping time can be used to design facilities appropriately. Design and operational strategies, such as adding multi-phase boosting, can be examined to minimize the effects of slugging. Using the Olga and PipeSim simulators, you can test various design options and gain an understanding of how best to operate the system.
Okay. So any questions about the video or the phenomena of the multi-phase flow that's shown in this video?
Sir,
Yep.
is pigging actually like that expensive that like they only do it like once a year or twice a year, sir?
Well, it's not really expensive, but the problem is if you perform pigging every day, then when you produce the oil and to produce money to get the profit, right? So it has to be scheduled. During pigging, that means you can't produce oil. That means you lose some production, and you can sell it to the consumer. And yep, that's the optimization to get profit as much as possible, basically. You don't want to interrupt the operation too frequent.
Is there another question, sir?
Yep, go ahead.
Is it impossible that we separate it before the rising, sir?
Well, how you want to install a at the bottom of the ocean?
Okay.
You know, it's very case by case. You know, just as in engineering problem, it's really case by case specific. If we're talking about a narrow, shallow sea means, I think if some of you live in Balikpapan, for example, a lot of offshore production in Balikpapan, but it's actually a very shallow sea, like only 7, 8, 11, 15 meter. But if we're talking about a deep ocean sea exploration, in Indonesia, I think we have some in Sulawesi. That's a deep ocean, like 3,000 meter, 3 kilometer depth. You can't. Well, it's almost it's impossible to install anything at the bottom of the sea to be operated continuously. So we have to deal with it, with the multi-phase flow, with the proper sizing of the pipeline, with the proper maintenance program, and so on. That's why you can imagine oil production and gas production from offshore is actually much more expensive than onshore production. Okay, any other questions? So again, just for your illustration, this software is actually I'm currently negotiating the software licensors to have academic license to ITB. My classmates is actually the sales engineer for this software. So we're actually trying to get those academic license and almost done. But actually, it's very expensive. It's like if you get into the business license, the license for this Olga is like 10,000 USD per month. So it's 150 million rupiah per month. Why? Because it's almost impossible to solve it like manually using Excel. Well, too much time just to derive the mathematical equation. If you remember what I explained to you about the gas pressure drop calculation, it will be calculated in a discrete way, not as in a overall segment of the pipeline. Why? Because it changes dynamically for every 5 meter or for every 10 meter. So yep, it's very complex and complicated mathematical calculation. That's why it's very expensive. And but it's very expensive because it's actually very required in an industry, and not a lot of people can perform this kind of calculation. And just to give you some motivations, if some of you really intrigued with this kind of simulation, well, I have a lot of, well, not a lot, some of the experience dealing with this simulation. So for example, just like 2 years ago, the Pertamina RU6 in Balongan, close to Cirebon, asking us to help design the offshore pipeline, the insulation, because it's a wax condition. So it's not some of them is a slug condition, but some of them is the wax formation. If it's not sized properly, the insulation, then the oil becomes too cold, and once the oil becomes too cold, some of them are precipitated at the bottom of the sea, and that caused some plugging into the pipeline. So they asked me as part of the team to design the correct insulation type, thickness to avoid those wax formation. And I think a couple, last year probably, or a couple of months ago, again they asked us to evaluate, because now Pertamina considering different variation of the crude imported from the Middle East, and different crude oil has different characteristic, has different density, has different wax condition. So they ask us to perform this Olga simulation, the transient simulation, to avoid the wax formation. So this kind of results is just for you to imagine the actual application in industry. So for example, we try different combination of temperature, ratio of the crude oil, just to make sure that it will not precipitate it before it reach the refinery. So yep, just to give you some illustration. Okay, any questions before I go back into the presentation?
All good, sir.
Okay, so what is expected for undergrad? So what expected is, you know, the basic phenomena and why it could happen, at least, and then you become familiarized with the terms. Okay, at least that's the outcome for undergrad. But I think we have some elective course for the 4th year and for master students about the multi-phase flow. So the details of the simulation is actually will be explained in those elective course at the 4th year or in the master course. So just so you know, because it's too much for 2nd year student to calculate, but at least you know the terms, you know the phenomena. Okay, so yep, this is the kind of variables that is involved in the calculations. Gas volumetric. Yep.
You're still in the YouTube, sir.
Oh, sorry. Okay, we go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so the calculation involves some of these variables, the gas volumetric flow rate that must be in cubic meter per second, for example, and then the liquid volumetric flow rate in also, for example, cubic meter per second, and then superficial. Superficial means assuming the pipeline is completely unfilled. Okay, so that's some of the example of the terms that we will use. So if we have a pipeline, we can express it in cubic meter per second. We can express it in meter per second, which is coming from cubic meter per second divided by the surface area of the pipeline. But sometimes when it starts to be filled by deposit at the bottom, so now the cubic meter per second is likely to be remains constant with the initial condition, because it's actually what's sent from the source. But now you can imagine the meter per second will actually start to, let's say, I think it will increase. Why? Because at the same cubic meter per second, but the square meter now is actually decreasing, because some of them cannot be used to properly flow the fluid. Okay, so the smaller area of the available pipeline, that what can be used to send the fluid. So sometimes now we refer it as a superficial velocity. Superficial means it's unfilled by anything. Okay, it's unfilled by anything. So even though there may be some deposit at the bottom, but we still assume all of the area can be used to properly send the fluid. So I think you will start to use those terms again when we are working with the solid and liquid mixture flow, which will happen in the 13 or 14 week, I think. So just so you start to familiarize the terms of superficial. That means it's assumed to be completely unfilled. So void fraction, that's another way to say it. The void fraction or the porosity is 1. That means all of the pipe is assumed to be available for the stream. Okay, and some of the other variables, cross-section area where both phase flow. So that's what I said as a square meter. That's the cross-section area, density, and so on. So actually, it's not that we're introducing a lot of new variables. It's just that now we have to separate the gas part and the liquid part and perform it sequentially. Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, Section 4, and so on. Because at different section, the dynamics are already different. So it cannot be assumed as a one big section of a pipe. Okay, so this is again just an illustration. I don't think I will spend too much time on this part. So I already talked about this. That's the cubic meter per second divided by the square meter of the pipeline. Now you get meter per second, the linear velocity, okay, of the pipeline, and that's the superficial flux velocity. That's why you have the per cubic meter per square meter at the bottom, the flux of the flow rate. Okay, so that's just some of the ratio that is used to calculate empirically the correlation, because you really can't derive analytically the equation used. So it's just empirical based on experimental data. Then you regress it, then that's what you got. So we don't really have to comprehend where is this coming from, It's coming from experiment. Someone regress it, and then it's good enough. Then we just use those empirical equation. Okay, so this is another variables that is used. Surface tension. I hope Pak Wawan already talked about this surface tension, like the coming from the Newton law. So the shear stress, affecting the shear stress of the flow. Area fraction, which is occupied by gas in a channel. Okay, so area fraction, that's what I said as a void fraction that can be used to flow the gas. If you have unfilled pipeline, that means all the area can be used to flow the gas, so the alpha will be 1. Ag divided by A is the same. Oops, what happens? Okay, so gas quality in the gas liquid phase is determined by so it's like the mass fraction of the gas. Omega is the mass fraction of the gas. So let's say you have 100 kilogram per second of overall combined liquid oil and gas, but once you measure it, actually the oil is only 80 kilogram per second, for example. That means the gas is like 20 kilogram per second. So you just now can estimate the mass fractions of the gas is actually 20 per 80 plus 20. So 0.2 of mass fraction of gas. Okay, why it's important? Now you start to realize whether it's gas dominant or liquid dominant. For this case, okay, it's actually oil dominant. And then we can start to plot it into the chart, into the regimes map, and then we start to have some judgment whether it's bubbly regimes or starting to get into a stratified regime or starting to get into the slug regimes. Okay, so yep, I guess that's quite straightforward. Okay, so at least you're familiarized with this kind of parameters. So as I talked to you before, once we get the mass of the gas, mass of the liquid, then we get the omega, we get the area, we get the area that is provided for the gas. Now we get the alpha. Alpha is previously mentioned as area available for the gas divided by the overall area of the pipeline. Now we are starting to be able to plot it, okay, to plot it into the regimes map. So now you can start to imagine, okay, if I have this kilogram per square meter of liquid, okay, that's the superficial flux velocity of a liquid. I have a small liquid and a small gas, then I will have a churn condition, churn regimes, okay. But if I start to increasing my oil production, but at the low gas velocity, now I have the second condition at a higher liquid, okay, that's a higher liquid compared to the first point, but at the same gas flow, now it will be liquid dominant, and it matches with our previous explanation that if it's liquid dominant, that it will be a bubble flow. In contrast, if I keep the same oil production, but now I push at the higher gas production, so now I have a higher gas superficial velocity, I will be working at a annular conditions. Okay. So again, the most avoided part is the slug flow. So you have to think, well, again, you can see very clearly that it's already divided by the square meter. Okay, it's already divided by the square meter of the pipeline. That's why it's very important for us to select the proper diameter of the pipeline. When we change the diameter, okay. So, oops, sorry, what happens? Okay, what if we, okay, what happens? What if we increase the diameter of the pipeline? What do you think will happen at same mass flow rate? Do you think the velocity will increase or the velocity will decrease?
The velocity will decrease.
Okay, at bigger diameter, of course, we will have a bigger area, right? We have a bigger area. That means the linear velocity will decrease. Okay, so that's why it's important. We can actually shift this map. So if you, from initial calculation, you get that now you're working at this slug condition, but you don't want that to happen. Okay, maybe I calculate the wrong diameter of the pipeline, and now I want to switch it to the bubble part. Okay, I want to switch the operation, the design, so that now I'm working at the bubble flow. That means I have to switch the liquid to be flow faster than before. If I work at the faster flow rate, then it will start to transition into the bubble flow. Okay, how can I get into this bubble flow? Okay, now I have to make it faster to flow. Okay, now I can't choose too big of the diameter. So actually the correct way, if I'm starting from the slug part, but I want to switch it to the bubble flow, then I need to decrease the diameter. Then I have a chance to avoid the slug. Okay, so that kind of thing is the decision that has to be made by engineers to design the network of the pipeline. Any questions about this regime map? And you don't don't use the border to literal, you know. The transition could change a lot. Okay, at different fluid, different oil, at different pressure, at different temperature, of course the border will change, will shift. Okay, but the idea will remain constant. Bubble will mostly at the liquid dominant case, annular will be at the gas dominant case, slug will be in the transition. Maybe when we have a different oil, now the transition shift a little bit to the left part and to the bottom part. That's very much possible. Okay, so that's why for every crude combination that I just talked to you to the previous project that I'm working for Pertamina, for example, they combine a different scenario. What happens once we receive tanker oil from Saudi, for example, and then for some other time we receive oil from tanker from Riau, from Dumai, from any Minas condition. They have different density. They have different API gravity. So the transition will shift. That's why we need a lot of tools to help us to get into this estimation. Okay, so what we need is the basic fundamental understanding how to solve the problem. Okay, I don't even remember the complete formula of how to calculate this all things, but I know how it works in the simulation. I know how it works in the software, and I know the basic concept. If I want this to be faster, then I have to switch it to this different pipeline diameter. So that sort of engineering judgment that you have to start to exercise. Okay.
Sir, I have a question.
Yep. Sure. Go ahead.
For the unit, sir, is that flow rate or is that like velocity, sir? I'm confused, sir.
I think it's kilogram per second. That's mass flow rate, but I think there's some mistake over here. The hold on, rho L. Okay. No, that's actually not a mistake. That's rho multiplied by J. Okay, rho is kilogram per meter cubic. So J is like a flux, flow flux. So flux means it's divided by square meter of the area. Okay, so it's like flow rate divided by the area and time. Flux usually involves some time basis. Okay, mass flux, so it will involve some time basis. So that sort of conversion, and then you multiply the flux. That's why we have square second. That must be coming from. So yep, well, as you probably aware, we just try to plot the chart in the simplest way possible, not as in the axis, but as in the transition. Okay, so probably they already tried to plot it as a function of a simple meter per second of gas and a liquid, but that doesn't give the author a good result in terms of the transition. So yep, and there's just I don't think there is one way to express this kind of regime map. Okay, so let's see. I think I have another regime map in the next slide. Here it is expressed as a multiplication of the density with the square of the flux flow. Okay, let me check in the next. Okay, in the next one, I think it's expressed in different unit. Okay, alpha G again. Alpha is the area filled by gas divided by the area overall. Okay, and Vg is actually, it's a linear velocity of the gas. Okay, so there is no one correct word to express it. Same thing over here. We have the area filled by the liquid divided by the overall area multiplied by the meter per second of the liquid. Okay, so it's fine. I will say that if we're just like an engineer that works in a engineering company or oil and gas company, we will not derive this chart. We just have to be able to use this chart. It's the designer of the pipeline that needs to derive those kind of chart. Okay, so first step is to be able to use this chart. Another way, and it's someone else's responsibility that has to generate this kind of curve. Okay. So just carefully look at the unit. Okay, so it could be expressed in flux, it could be expressed in linear velocity. There is no right or wrong way to do that. It's doable for any combination. Okay, any other questions? Okay. So, yep, there's another way to express the regime map, again with different unit, but again, that's just the proof what I said earlier. It's just a guideline that help us to be able to know the regime as fast as possible for specific application, for a specific fluid combination. So at this point, we just have to be familiar with the parameters. So G, that means the superficial flux velocity. So just check in the earlier slide about the type of the variables that is typically used in the system. Okay. So I think that's for the oil and gas application, but it's for the petrochemical or the traditional chemical industry, it still be involves. We still have some application of gas liquid application. Okay, so I think this is example for a boiler. Okay, so you have a boiler with water. That means it's actually a water, right? And then you send it to a boiler, and you have a syngas feed. You want to get methanol production. Okay, so methanol is carbon monoxide plus 2 hydrogens become CH3OH. Yep, I think that's balanced. So that's the synthesis of methanol from a syngas. Syngas is the carbon monoxide plus hydrogen. So you feed CO plus H2 over here, and then you get unreacted syngas plus methanol as a vapor. And it could involve some phase change, for example. So of course, the balance or the dynamics of gas liquid will have some portion in this kind of reactor design. Okay, so dispersion of gas bubble in liquid is commonly used in a bubble column design. And even if we trying to properly design a boiler is where you send the boiler feed water, and then you get some heat regardless of the source, and you get H2O in vapor at the outlet, while you send as a liquid in the inlet. So of course, phase change happens, evaporation happens, and the dynamics of the fluid flow at the inlet, which is liquid, will be different with the dynamics of the fluid flow at the outlet of the boiler, which is a vapor. The density already changed very significantly. The enthalpy already changed very significantly. The heat constant already changed very significantly. So The transition will be the challenging part when we're trying to properly design a boiler. Okay, so slip velocity, I think it will be explained in more detail in the next topic after the second exam. Okay, so U usually that means in meter per second, linear velocity. Q is a debit, volumetric velocity. Again, that's the square meter of the pipeline. That's the void fraction, the field area of the pipeline. In the opposite, if you try to calculate the meter per second of the liquid, it comes from the overall liquid volumetric flow rate, again in cubic meter per second, and divided by the area of the overall pipeline, but that's the one minus the void fraction, the part where liquid flows in the pipeline. Okay, so again, if you have a liquid at the bottom and you have a vapor at the top, that means that part represents the alpha, and that part represents the 1 minus alpha, the part where the liquid filled. Okay. Okay, so how many times I have left? Around 40 minutes, I think. So let me conclude this topic with one last big topic about the example of pressure drop calculation. Okay, and this is the simplest method for gas liquid pressure drop calculation. Okay, sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not accurate, but it's simple enough for undergrad to imagine the step of calculation for a multi-phase flow. So it's called Lockhart-Martinelli. Okay, it's called Lockhart-Martinelli methods. Of course, with the advance of computational tools, there are newer methods to calculate these pressure drop calculations. But we will not talk in detail about this in this lecture. Okay, it's just to give you some idea, the simplest possible method to calculate the multi-phase flow. Okay, again, where is this coming from? This is coming from their experiment from Lockhart and Martinelli while conducting research on multi-phase flow system like this. So a lot of countries has a very good research on this. So the US, for example, of course, you have a good laboratory. Even in Norway, in some Northern Europe country, they have a good laboratory to perform this kind of experiment. So I have my close friend, my high school and classmates in ITB, who's currently just finishing his PhD in multi-phase flow. So goes into a multi-phase flow laboratory setting to derive this kind of expression, to derive this kind of empirical equations. So yep, it's coming from experiment, regress it empirically. So the concept in Lockhart-Martinelli, okay, so this is the Lockhart-Martinelli methods. So you can, I hope you still paying attention on how it's calculated, okay? So the main concept over here, that's the main concept. We try to calculate the pressure drop of a two-phase flow, but it's just too impossible to directly calculate it as a two-phase flow. So we start assuming the case as gas flow, as 100% gas. Okay, so what does that mean? If you have a pipeline with a fixed diameter, okay, with a fixed length, so just as a number, let's say the length is 1 kilometer. Well, no, let me change that because it's stated as 100 feet. to be consistent, the length is 100 feet. Regardless of the diameter, let's say the diameter is 10 inch, for example, okay? The actual case is we have Q liquid as, for example, 1000 cubic feet per second, and the Q gas is 100 cubic feet per second. Okay, let's say that's the actual case, but it's too hard to directly calculate into this condition. So the starting point is we assume the case to be 100% gas. So we still use the same diameter as 10 inch. We still use the length to be 100 feet. We assume now the total combined volumetric as 1100 feet per second. Okay, so all the liquid and the gas is assumed to be everything to be in a gas condition first. This is a straightforward calculation because if it's assumed to be 100% gas, that means you can calculate the pressure drop as a Fanning correlation, okay? Fanning or Moody correlation that is explained in the previous topics, okay? So pressure drop is calculated as a function of friction factor, Reynolds, length, velocity, straightforward, okay? Within, I don't know, maybe 20-30 minutes you can do it. But after you assume that it is calculated as a pure gas condition, now you add the correction factor. Okay, so that's the correction factor. And the correction factor is called a modulus of two-phase flow. Okay, so this is where the Lockhart-Martinelli comes from. They will help to get the number of this correction factor. And you can imagine this is a square actually. The phi square is the modulus of two-phase flow. So, and most of the time the phi square will be higher than 1. Okay, most of the time the phi square will be more than 1. That means every time we have a two-phase flow, the actual pressure drop will be more than 1 of the pure gas assumption. Why? Again, we already talked about that. The dynamics, the slug, the wave, and so on. Okay, so that's the basic idea. So this part can be calculated as explained in the previous topics. The new concept now is how to calculate this modulus of two-phase flow. Okay, using empirical experimental data. Okay, any questions so far?
All good, yeah.
Okay. So now the question is how to calculate this modulus. Okay. The delta P part, again, this is another empirical equation that is provided by Lockhart-Martinelli, but it's actually, I would say, equivalent to Fanning equation. Okay, it's actually equivalent to Fanning equation for a pure gas system. Okay, so I don't really mind if you calculate the delta P as a function of well, you see that's the friction factor. Same thing with the I think it's F. You have L per D. You have V square per 2. That's the typical calculation for the pressure drop, more or less something like that. So it's not exactly the same, but it's not completely different. So I mean, we use F over here, and then they have kilogram per second over here divided by kilogram per cubic meter. Okay, kilogram per second divided by kilogram per cubic meter. Now you get meter cubic per second, right? And instead of cubic meter per second, we directly use the meter per second in the Fanning calculation. And it's square, so it's more or less the same. I mean, it's equivalent. Okay, so it's just empirical equation that is used for Lockhart-Martinelli. according to Darcy. Okay, it's coming from the same concept. That's not the new part in this slide. Okay, the new part in this slide is how to calculate the modulus. Okay, that's what's really important. So modulus of two-phase flow, phi, is just a phi with another type of modulus. Okay, we calculate some kind of modulus from another modulus. Okay, so modulus of two-phase flow of phi is calculated based on Lockhart-Martinelli modulus X. Okay, so the general correlation will be phi is equal to A X B. Okay, so why? Because the previous calculations, the delta P of two-phase equal to delta P gas times phi square, I will say that this is a generic equation. Okay, so this is actually a generic equation for a two-phase flow. That's why the phi is not called directly as a Lockhart-Martinelli, because somebody else will claim that they will have a better equation with a better modulus. That's fine. Okay, the hypothesis from Lockhart-Martinelli is now I can propose how to easily get those modulus. Okay, so I can easily get the modulus of two-phase flow if you can calculate the X, the Lockhart-Martinelli that is proposed by his research team. Okay, so it can be derived again empirically. AXB, A is a variable function of mass flow of gas and cross-sectional area of a pipe. Okay, so it's coming from the kilogram per second of the gas and the meter square of the pipeline. And B is another constant from Lockhart-Martinelli. And what is X? Okay, so be mindful, X is the L Lockhart-Martinelli modulus. Okay. Oops, sorry, wrong direction. So X is square foot of ratio between pure liquid assumption divided by pure gas assumption. Okay, so that is what proposed by Lockhart-Martinelli. Again, similar with the previous explanation, we have, for example, gas as cubic per second, for example, my previous example, to 100 assumption. Now, Lockhart-Martinelli said that we have to assume both extremes. Okay, we have to assume both extremes. One extreme is completely as a liquid. Okay, that means assumption one, what if now everything is expressed as Q liquid, which is 1000 plus 100 in this example. Okay, so everything is assumed to be liquid using the specific pipeline that is designed in this example. So previously I said that it's 100 feet, for example, and the diameter, let's say, is 10 inch. Okay, so that's assumption one. Coming from this, we can calculate the Darcy equation, the Fanning equation, the Moody equation. Now we get the delta P for the liquid. Okay, that help us to get into the first input to get the X. And then assumption two. Okay, assumption two, which should have been done earlier, assuming that everything now is a gas. Okay, everything now is a gas. We get the same flow rate, but now you can imagine that the linear velocity must be different. If you assume it's a liquid, the density will close to oil, will close to water, close to 1,000 kilogram per cubic meter. But when we assume it as a gas, the density must be much smaller than the first assumption. So the delta P of the liquid must be different with the delta P of pure gas. Okay. Once you get that number, now you get the value of X squared. Okay, the ratio between those delta P liquid per delta P gas, that's the X squared. And once we know the X squared, it will help us to get modulus of two-phase flow using those previous correlation. Okay. So the x square can be okay. Okay, so let me put it this way. So the Lockhart-Martinelli tells you that the delta P can actually be calculated as a function of friction factor, kilogram per second, meter of the pipeline, and density. Okay, now try to imagine you have the delta P of the liquid per delta P of the gas. Okay, now I have another equation over here. So assuming now that's the liquid, now that's the delta P 100 of the gas. Okay, what will happen? I will have the same constant. I have the same friction. Gas square per d n rho. Then you just have to start to imagine which variable will be different for liquid versus gas. What do you think? Are you going to have different diameter? Are you going to have a different density? Are you going to have a different mass rate and friction factor? Which can be neglected because it has the same value when you assume it's to be a liquid and you have the same value when it is assumed to be a gas. Any idea? Constant, same.
Diameter can be neglected. Sir.
Okay, diameter can be neglected. It's the same diameter. Okay, let's check the derivation. Okay, that's actually correct. We can neglect the diameter. We can neglect the constant. What is left is the F, the W, and the rho. Okay. And okay, so that's x squared, right? X squared is delta P liquid per delta P gas. We neglect the same diameter, we neglect the same constant, then we end up with this correlation. Ratio of the square of the mass rate and then the density, because it's completely different between a vapor and a liquid, per the F. Okay, F is coming as a function of Reynolds, if you remember the fanning chart. Looks that way, right? That's a Reynolds. That's the F. Oops, sorry. That's the F. And as you could probably understand, Reynolds is rho linear velocity diameter per mu. So of course, when we assume it's to be a liquid versus we assume it's to be a vapor, density different, viscosity different, linear velocity also different. Because linear velocity is cubic meter per second per cubic square. The cubic square part is the same, but the cubic meter per second must be different. Because the same part is the mass rate. Okay, so to get the linear velocity, you come from the volumetric rate per surface area, but the volumetric rate at liquid condition must be different with the volumetric rate at gas condition. Why? Because the same part is the mass rate, mass balance, mass conservation. The mass part, the kilogram per second part, that will be the same for gas and liquid. But the density part is different, so the overall linear velocity part will be also different when we assume pure liquid versus pure gas. Okay, so now we get the ratio of the F, ratio of the density, ratio of the volumetric rate, then we get the x squared. Okay, and we'll say that's mostly it. Once we get the value of x squared, everything else is quite simple for Lockhart-Martinelli. Okay, what's this? Okay, it's actually the same thing. Okay, yeah, it's actually the same thing. We're up until this part.
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Yep.
For the delta P gas and liquid, is it energy loss due to just frictional, or is it due to like including like Bernoulli, sir? Like, pressure, the height and stuff like that.
Well, mostly it's coming from the straight pipeline part. Okay, mostly it's coming from the straight pipeline part. So if we use the Lockhart-Martinelli correlation over here, it's not really obvious that we have the L per D part, right? Because if it's like the complete pipeline, L per D part can be the sum of L per D of straight pipeline plus L per D of the fitting and so on. Okay, so this is, I would say, mostly from the friction. Okay, so in the Bernoulli part, it's just the friction part, not the difference in elevation, difference in pressure, and so on.
What's W again, sir? Sorry.
Mass flow rate.
Mass flow rate. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so we're up until this part. Hopefully it's very clear. How can we get into this X square, the Lockhart-Martinelli constants? Okay. And again, from this correlation, if you try to substitute into different expression, it's possible, but not mandatory. So if you already know the numbers of W, of rho, of F, then you can directly use this part to calculate the X square. Okay. Alternatively, if you don't really like to use the Fanning chart to get into this F, then the option is to substitute the F using empirical equation. Okay, so that's another option, another alternative if you don't want to deal with the Fanning chart. So once we substitute the F with this another empirical calculation derived from the Reynolds, then we basically can substitute the F part into the ratio of Reynolds. Okay. So again, it's not mandatory. It's really an option. Last part. Okay, we finished the part where we already get the X square, right? We get the X square from the previous correlation. Let me W L rho F. Is that correct, or am I getting it correct? So we're coming from this previous step to calculate the X square, the Lockhart-Martinelli parameter. So let's say now we know that the X square is 10, for example. That means the delta P liquid per delta P gas of this specific calculation is 10. Okay, 10. If the case is liquid, then the pressure drop will be 10 times higher than the pure gas condition. Let's say, as an example. Then we get that the X square is equal to 10. Then you just have to go into this last part of calculation. So X square is 10. So now X is actually 10. So it's, I don't know, 3 point something. Okay, I don't want to complicate my example. So let's just now say the X square is 9. So the X is actually 3. So you go to this chart, the final chart, then find where is 3. So that's 5, that's 3. Okay, that's my axis. And then which case am I working? Okay, you have 4 different sets over here. Turbulent, laminar, turbulent, and so on. Okay, so you have a different kind, because when you assume this, when you perform this calculation, you must calculate the Reynolds only for the liquid part is equal to rho U liquid diameter per mu liquid. And then to get into this the gas calculation, you must come from the rho of the gas, velocity of the gas, diameter per mu of the gas. Okay, so you have all these physical properties, and then you match those definition, the Reynolds liquid and the Reynolds gas, and then you match into the boundary. I can't remember the boundary very easily, but I think the laminar will be like less than 3000, if I'm not mistaken, something. That's laminar. And for turbulent, maybe the Reynolds will be higher than 5000 something, for example. Once you match into those number, okay, now I know that both of them are turbulent, for example. I know I'm working with a very turbulent case for a pure liquid and for a pure gas. So in that case, use the symbol of turbulent. Okay, so match with the top, as you can see over here, match with the top series. Okay, match with the top series. So that's why I should use. So drag it to the left. Okay, I don't know, maybe that's 4, for example. So we get the two-phase modulus. Okay, final step would be back to the first equation. Delta P of two-phase flow is equal to delta P of pure gas times the modulus square. Don't forget the square part. Okay, this is where it's really interesting. Initially, you think, oh, maybe I just got 4 times higher than the pressure drop of the pure gas, but that's not really the case. In this example, what you get is now you get 16 times of the typical pressure drop of the gas for the same flow rate, for the same pipeline, for the same length. Why? That's really the mystery of two-phase flow. That's why it's really avoidable. That's really why we really want to avoid it. Okay. And the case could be even more extreme, as you probably see over here. If we turn up, get that the X is actually 100, so the delta P liquid per delta P gas is actually 100. Okay. And then you try to match the gas part, okay? And even in the most extreme part, you see that it could reach the modulus as equal to 100. That means the modulus will be square will be 10,000. That means when normally you just have delta P of gas, let's say it's to be 0.1 bar per 100 meter pipeline, for example. Now, in the most extreme case, two-phase flow, now you get 10,000 higher than that. Okay, 10,000 higher than that. That means it's 1,000 bar per 100 meter. It's like the non-flowing system. I can't even imagine a flow having a 1,000 bar. It's very, very high. Even in a high pressure oil and gas system, it's like working with like 100, 200 bar. That's still, you can see some of those applications, but 1,000 bar, I don't think any actual application would match those numbers. So, yep, it's just to give you like the extreme condition of a two-phase flow. It's not good for your work. Okay, any questions? I think I finished my Lockhart-Martinelli explanations. So hopefully it gives you some idea how to get the pressure drop calculation.
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Sure.
Regarding the graph, when do you use the psi G and when do you use the psi L, sir? Because there's two curves there, right?
Yep. I think you can do it both. Okay, I think you can do it both. And or if you want to be more safe, then I would say that choose the dominant part of your stream. Okay, choose the dominant part of your stream. That means if you know that it's liquid dominant, then you choose this correlation. Okay. Because to get into this part, actually the number is coming from this correlation. Okay, the phi L square is equal to 1 plus C. For example, previously, if we get to know that the case is turbulent, then the C is 20, right? 20 per X. X previously, I give you example of 3 and another example of 100. So that's 3 plus 1 per 9, for example. So now I get that my phi L square is 1 plus 6.7 plus 0.1 something. So it's like 7.8. Okay, roughly it's around 7.8. Okay, I get now that the square phi L, the modulus two-phase flow for my case is this number.
Also, one more thing here, the formula that you gave us, yang psi equals to ax to the power of b, what's that relating to this one, sir?
It's a different expression. Okay, it's a different expression. If the number provided is the C part, then use this expression. Okay, but if the handbook or the brochure from the licensors provide you not the C part, but provide you the A and B, okay, then you use this correlation. You still get the X coming from the delta P ratio, right? But the pipeline vendor instead provide you the A and B instead of the C, then simply use this correlation. It could just a different expression. Okay.
So A and B will be given, right, sir?
Yes, yes. A and B will be given because again, this is very specific for your pipeline, right? The material of your pipeline, the diameter of your pipeline, the roughness of your pipeline. Of course, it will affect the performance of your pressure drop in the pipeline.
Okay, sir.
It's a constant based on empirical experiment. That's really it. Okay, so let me check. Do I have? Okay, that's it. Summary. Lockhart-Martinelli equation can be solved in short time, relatively speaking. Well, short is relative. Okay, so again, let's imagine you have a very long pipeline. I think if I want to give you like the most extreme condition, we have to phase flow in Natuna Island, for example. Natuna offshore condition to produce oil and gas, and it is sent to Malaysia in Singapore. It's like, I don't know, more than 500 kilometers. I don't know the exact number, 500 kilometers from Natuna to Singapore, for example. Okay, and you realize that in the Lockhart-Martinelli equation, calculation is applied for every 100 feet. Okay, that means you will partition this pipeline into every 100 feet until you reach the end of your destination. So if in the most extreme case, like in the 500 kilometer, I think you will do a repetitive thousands of calculation. So it's short time only for one section, but for a complex system, again, that's not really doable. Okay, so it's not always give you a good accuracy and in many different flow conditions because it's very dynamics. Other equations such as Bakes and Real involve a more complex computations. Okay. So nowadays, evaluation of multi-phase flow is typically using a software such as Olga and PipeSim. It's very expensive, but if you're good at operating this kind of software, well, you will be highly in demand for, to solve this kind of problem. Okay, so, but the more important thing is we know the basic fundamental of how it works, which parameter affects which results, and so on. So you have a very good judgment of how to solve a problem. Okay. Again, the equation, it's not the most important part. How to derive the equation, I don't care. I just need to know what parameter affects some of the more important objective functions, and that would be the case for most of the engineers. Okay, any questions?
All good so far, sir.
Okay, so if everything's good, that means I will wrap up my class. We finished the two-phase gas liquid flow, okay? And that's the end of the topics for the second module exam. After the second module exam, there will be another mixed phase flow, but that's for a solid liquid flow. Not a gas liquid, but a solid liquid flow, okay? So that will be covered in the third module. So now please start to prepare for the exam. I think based from the last discussion that we have with Pak Wawan, Pak Yogi, and Pak Haryo, it's likely to be arranged on next Saturday, just as in the first module exam system. Okay, so be prepared. And on Tuesday, we still have a class for 1 hour, and we will use it for practice exercise. Okay. Probably I will ask the assistant to join the Tuesday session, so you will have more on-hand exercise as one of the preparation for the exam. Okay, and the Thursday class should not be held because it will be dedicated for the exam. Okay, I think that's it. So good luck for the exam, okay? And please prepare accordingly. Okay, see you.
Thank you very much, Pak Anggi.
Thank you so
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.